It's every parent's worst nightmare, watching your child fall off a horse or pony. So I get a lot of phone calls from parents asking about how we can help keep children safe in the saddle. And of course, we're thinking about helmets and safety stirrups, but we're also getting more and more questions about body protection, i.e. foam body protectors and air vests. Especially for parents of young hunter-jumper riders, we are finding that people are really interested in the air vest versus the body protectors, but there's actually a lot to know about putting children in air vests, and I actually generally don't recommend it. So why don't I recommend air vests for small children? Here are the 5 key things that you need to know. First of all, each vest works on a trigger weight, and the child has to weigh the minimum amount to be able to activate that trigger. Most adult vests are set on a 77-pound minimum trigger weight, and then there are a few children's vests that are 55 pounds and 44 pounds. Anytime we're getting into weights less than that, then I have real concern about a child being in an air vest. The reason those trigger weights are really important that sometimes parents don't realize is that if the child isn't heavy enough to activate the trigger, not only is the air vest not going off, but the child actually risks being dragged, which could be catastrophic. So even if the child is a pound off, I'm not taking the risk. The other thing that we have to consider is that we have to think about what size animal is that child riding, because they need to have far enough to fall to be able to actually hit the end of the tether, have the key ball pop out, and have the vest fully inflate before the child hits the ground. If it's a vest that doesn't offer a shorter lanyard option or doesn't allow for adjustment of the saddle strap to make it as tight as possible, that vest might not trigger fast enough. So especially when I'm working with children that are on small and medium ponies, I am very careful to make sure that we can achieve a trigger speed fast enough based on the height of the pony, the height of the child, and the lanyard length and saddle strap length. A third thing is to consider in this is how mature is your child? Are you going to be there every time they ride? Because they're going to either need to remember to unclip from their saddle, also to clip on when they're first getting on, because if they forget, then they might be activating the vest when they go to dismount after their ride. And with that, there's ongoing cost, which shouldn't actually be the primary consideration, but these things are expensive. The vests are expensive. The canisters are expensive. So if it's not something that your child is mature enough to be able to remember every time, or you're not going to be there to remind them every time, that's something else to consider. A fourth thing that's really critical is sizing. So we have to make sure not just what size is the pony and is the vest going to trigger fast enough, but we also just have to think about the sizing of the child, because the vest needs to fit appropriately. So we want to make sure that the vest isn't going to be too long and that it's not going to be too loose, and therefore swimming around, or I like to say we don't want the canister floating on the torso. The last thing I'll mention with children's air vest sizing, and a lot of parents really don't like to hear this, but it's just the reality, especially if the child is riding something smaller. Kids are just more resilient. They're way more resilient than I am. So you don't tend to hear a lot of cases of severe injury like spinal injury, neck injury, things of that nature with children, because their ligaments are just more pliable, more flexible. So can they get hurt? Absolutely. And obviously we are here to make sure that kids are staying as safe as possible. But usually what we see with kids is issues in terms of bone fractures, and it's usually like a wrist or an arm. So vests are great to keep the torso protected, but we just see less catastrophic injury in kids. So then what do I recommend? For the child that doesn't meet the criteria for an air vest, I really strongly recommend a foam body protector. I have a lot of parents that contact me looking for an air vest and they say, well, if we can't have an air vest, we're not going to do anything. And to me, that's a real head scratcher, because if the goal is to keep a child safe, those foam body protectors do an exceptionally good job. They come in a variety of different models and designs and thicknesses, where we can really evaluate what is the child doing riding wise, how much risk are they potentially encountering, and what is the most appropriate product for them. And especially if you start them young and small, these vests do not feel as bulky as some people might think. They've become very sleek. They don't change the outline or the contour of the rider. So I would much rather see a child in a properly fitting body protector that isn't going to introduce risk versus an air vest that we're concerned about a whole bunch of things, including it not triggering on time, it not fully inflating, a child constantly forgetting to unclip, and all of those things that are associated with an air vest. In closing, if you're trying to figure out what is the most appropriate thing for your young rider, don't hesitate to reach out to us. There's a contact form on our website. You can reach out by phone or by chat through our website, and we'd be happy to talk through all of the different options to help keep your rider safe in the saddle.